All right, I got 6:02, so I'll get started. If people come in, they can. So thank you for those that are coming here this evening. As I was getting ready for this, talking about the PEPL tonight, it said understanding the physical plan and equipment levy. I thought maybe a better title would be helping to understand. I don't know that anyone will have the full grasp of all the intricacies of school finance and everything, but hopefully it gives us a better understanding and what we're talking about here. So thank you for coming. At the end here, not that you can't ask questions during it, but at the end, if you want to ask some questions, we'll have some mics to go around. If there's some questions, which I'm sure there will be at the end on anything I said, you can ask that. So what we're talking about here on November 4th, the school district will vote, the patrons of Sibley Waukegan School District will vote to pass the physical plan and equipment levy, which has been in place, but we're talking about passing it and renewing it at the rate of $1.34. I'm going to talk about, by the end of the presentation here, it's used by a majority of the school districts in Iowa, and hopefully you'll see that by the end, to repair and maintain their schools, including technology, buses, and equipment. It can be imposed for up to 10 years. The existing one will expire at the end of this fiscal year. And then hopefully by the end tonight, we can answer some questions and talk about why we're putting this in front of voters at the $1.34 rate. So some background with this. There's two parts to the physical plant and equipment levy, or the PEPL. There's a board approved part, which is for 33 cents. That has to be approved by the school board. Any district that has that is approved annually. And then there's a voted part, or which people will call the VPPL, that can be approved for up to $1.34. Our current rate is at 67 cents. I'll talk about later, but you'll see almost every school in Iowa does the board one annually, and I'll talk about that in a little bit here. I'm not going to do this, but when we put this on the website, if you wanted to really dig in and look at the Iowa code that references this, those are the two parts that talk about adopting the levy and why we're doing this, and then what are the allowable uses. And then this just kind of gives an overview, and I'll talk about it more specifically in a second here, but what do we use, or what can schools use the funds that come from the physical plant equipment levy, or the PEPL. You can do for construction, repair, bus purchases and repairs over $2,500, the leases of buses or other lease operated purchases or equipment. A lot of technology, not only computers when I say technology, but talking about your switches, servers, things like that. Non-instructional software, and a bunch of other things. So specifically, what it allows us to do in code here is purchase or improve property, construction of schools, buildings, and roads, or infrastructure around that, purchase and lease equipment and technology exceeding $500 per transaction, so talking about like purchasing Chromebooks each year when we have done our rotation between the elementary, middle school, high school. Musical instruments, I'll talk about that more later, or if there's questions on that. Copiers, projectors, or now we don't really use projectors anymore, but TVs in the classroom and those type of displays, software licenses for non-instructional purposes, paying down debt of existing buildings, procuring or acquiring library facilities, repairing and remodeling or reconstructing the existing facilities, demo of buildings that are out of date, expenditures for energy conservation, any rentals, transportation equipment, not just buses, but vehicles, things like that. Purchases and lease of buildings, equipment for rec purposes, and then asbestos inspection and remediation. What we can't do, and I think this is key to be aware of, what we can't use any PEPL funds for are employee salaries, including mine, for those that ask, benefits and travel, materials and supplies like curriculum, things like that, printing or media services, heating and cooling, our monthly bills at the buildings, or any other purposes that aren't stated by code. Okay, so the PEPL that we're talking about, when we approve that, it's for a max duration of 10 years, the voted PEPL, and it takes a simple majority, so that means 50% plus 1. So simple math, if you had 100 people, you would need 51 yeses. If you had 101 people, 51 yeses again. Half plus 1, it has to be just over 50%. And the rate has to be no more, or the max is $1.34 for the voted part. Ours is currently 67 cents. And so we're voting to renew that and bring that up to the $1.34 level. The school board approved the district voters to authorize and vote on this, including income surtax, which we'll talk about and has been in place the last 10 years. And then the use of that doesn't generate any more dollars. It just shifts where they're coming from where that tax burden is. It doesn't bring in more dollars overall. That same amount of dollars is brought regardless of income surtax, which we'll talk about. So for the current year, because we are in FY26, the voted PEPL generates for our district for this year to the dollar $282,445 through the formula. That's what it generates for us. We have $115,842 of that coming through income surtax. So then $166,603. If you add those two together, it'd come up to the top line. It comes through property tax. So what that does is it provides a property tax reduction. And then from the voted portion, we get $139,115, through the board part. We have $139,115. So the effective rate, when you hear us talk about the effective rate of our voted PEPL at 39 cents, that's because some of those funds were generated through the income surtax, so that lowers the effective rate. The reality is in dollars, the $282,000 that through the formula we were able to allocate this year through PEPL didn't change. Okay, so income surtax, how does that work? It is very confusing. I get that when you don't look at that or deal with it every day. Okay, it's applied to the state tax bill for residents. Okay, these aren't exact numbers. I'm just using them to round. I have no idea what a family who has a taxable income of $40,000. I'm just using this for the sake of argument. Okay, so if a family had a taxable income of $40,000 and they pay $2,000 in Iowa state income tax, that's their state tax liability. A surtax really by definition is a tax on a tax. So you would take that $2,000 tax bill times 3% and you get 60 bucks. So now instead of 2,000, it's 2,060. That's where those dollars are generated when we're talking income surtax. Okay, it only applies to the individual income tax payers, not corporate income tax filers. And then the mix of that income surtax that's generated and our property tax, which is determined by the board and passed by ballot language by the voters, is what generates our dollars annually through the voted PEPL. Okay, the maximum rate it's at is 20%. That doesn't mean we'll set it there, but that's by law what the maximum rate for income surtax can be. That's not Sibley Cheatham, that's not Stan saying that. That's by law, and that's what the ballot language has to read. Is that confusing? Absolutely it is. But that's the way it has to be worded legally. That's the highest the combined income surtax rate can be. Does that mean Sibley Cheatham's rate is 20%? No, it does not. But that's the highest it can be set legally. So for the current year, FY26, we know that 1% of income surtax generates about $38,614. Okay? Another place, which kind of confuses this, where income surtax applies is something called the instructional support levy. We'll just say that's part of the general fund. We'll explain that. But we have a 7% income surtax rate for that, for the instructional support levy. That offsets that tax. It provides about $270,000 of relief. Okay? So without the use of the income surtax, like we talked about, or I mentioned earlier, our PEPL rate would be at the 67-cent level. That's what it's approved for. But because of that income surtax, we have about 28 cents of relief. The rate is effectively 39 cents rounding, roughly. Okay? Because we have a 3% income surtax rate, it generates that 115 like I talked about earlier. That's why our effective rate, when you hear people talk about what our effective voted PEPL rate is at 39 cents, it's because of the income surtax. It generates some relief. Okay? Now, with that, you'll sometimes hear schools talk about the SAVE fund, which is the penny-wide sales tax. The SAVE fund and PEPL, many of their uses overlap and are very similar. There's very few things that can be done in one and not the other. So sometimes they're used interchangeably. Two separate funds, two separate funding streams, but they can be used for very similar purposes. If you remember back, those that are maybe of a more mature age, it started out as the silo, the state, I gotta remember your state infrastructure and local option sales tax. Most counties adopted one. It wasn't uniform. When they adopted it, I don't know fully, but I know Osceola County roughly somewhere in the early 2000s had the silo tax in place. Eventually, in 2009, I think it is, going from memory here, I think it was 2009 when it became statewide. the local option sales tax became statewide, and it is now approved through the year 2050. It'll probably be extended at some point, but right now it's approved through the year 2050. For our schools, we get for this current year $1,357.87. We know that for the current year per student on our certified enrollment. Okay? One of the issues, I won't say issues, but one of the complexities with the SAVE Fund is that's enrollment driven. PEPL's not enrollment driven, that's our assessed value driven within our school district. SAVE Fund is enrollment driven, so if you have declining enrollment, you'll have less dollars coming into that SAVE Fund in the next year. So the state penny, it's been in use for us to pay for a variety of things similar to PEPL, like I talked about. Moving forward, we have SAVE bonds. So if you think back in roughly 2018 when we did the band addition and they redid the HVAC at the high school, they financed that addition, and there's some other parts with that, but they financed that through borrowing against SAVE or revenue bonds. It wasn't a debt bond. It didn't add to our levy rate, but we borrowed against SAVE. You can borrow against future earnings. The project we did in this past year, and that's being finished up now, that included HVAC at the elementary, the entrances, roof on the middle school, fire alarm system. I'm probably forgetting some things in there, but the most recent project was also a revenue bond, borrowing against future earnings, against SAVE, okay? Moving forward, paying those back over the next handful of years, between that and our bus leases, which is how we provide bus services to the district, we'll probably use a majority of our SAVE funds year in, year out. So when we're factoring that in, with that expiring in 2050, the shortened window for bonding, what I mean by that is there's only certain times a year where school districts bring up a bond. We're not looking to bring one up, but I'm just saying that. There's only certain times where that can be bought before the public. And then their duration is a max of 20 years. Many schools are turning to also finance reconstruction, new buildings through borrowing against SAVE, which we're doing as well. But when you're combining that with the decreasing enrollment, paying back our 2 revenue bonds and the bus purchases, the leases, without having PEPL, that's going to put a strain on what we can do facilities-wise. So comparing our PEPL fund to the general fund, so items currently funded with PEPL are necessary to provide instruction. They might not pay for teachers or curriculum, but I think buses, technology is important, having upgraded facilities, other things like that. If those items aren't funded through PEPL, we either have to make some decisions on what's necessary, or do we use general fund dollars for that? And then that's less for teachers, that's less for curriculum, that's less for those type of things. Okay, and they're dedicated to instruction. That's the primary purpose of our general fund, like it talks about supporting classrooms, teachers, textbooks, heating and lighting, things like that. So if you think of it this way, general fund pays for the people and the programs we provide to educate our students. The PEPL's the buildings, the buses, the tools, and the things like that that make it possible. And they're kind of separated and have a specific use for that. This is for Northwest AEA. So that's the AEA we're a part of. There's 34 schools in that. And so just to kind of compare us to other schools and give you some data here, 73% of the districts in Northwest AEA have a voted PEPL in place. That is lower than the state average, which we'll talk about. I can't confirm this, but it might be one of the lower AEA averages across the state. Just saying that as a fact, not saying anything more than that. So the ones on the left, there's 9 districts. They don't have a voted PEPL in place. Probably different reasons for that. I can't point here, but that first bar, we're right in there. Those are the schools that have a 67-cent voted PEPL in place. There's a few oddities in there. There's 2 that are at $1, one's at $1.03, and then the rest are at $1.34 in our AEA. Those that have red in the bar, those that have red have some of that voted PEPL supplanted with income surtax dollars. Okay? So you can see where we're at. Sibley-Ocheyedan is the 5th one over with the red there. That's where we're at. Okay? In our AEA, of those schools, the 25 that have the voted PEPL, about half, 12, just under it, have the income surtax. So if you're looking at this, You're required, if you have it in place, you have to set it at least 1%. So if you can look up there, just some of the schools are at 1, some are at 5, 6, there's a handful at 1 again, there's a couple at 3. And then what this is showing on the left, it's showing what their max voted rate is, what the surtax rate is, and then what that provides in reduction and what their effective rate is, okay? And you can't say dollar for dollar how much relief that'll provide. So I'm going to use us at 3% in South O'Brien as an example. Both of us have an income surtax rate at 3%. We're getting 27 cents roughly worth of relief or property tax relief from that 3% income surtax. So our effective rate's at 39 cents. They're only getting 16 cents of relief. Well, why is that? Well, they probably, in their district, the income tax, they have less total income tax, state income tax dollars paid. So it's not generating the same amount of funds. So that's why sometimes it varies on how much income tax you have in that school district. It varies on what your total assessed value is. All those things play into the rate. So in the state, statewide, currently there's 325 districts. 323 have an annual board approved PEPL. That's that 33-cent one, okay? After this year, we'll have 324 districts in the state because one of them is closing and they're one of the ones that don't have a board approved one. So a year from now, I would say that's 323 out of 324 if other things haven't changed. Have a board approved 33-cent PEPL, which we have in place. Ours generates $139,000 annually right now for the current year, okay? Of the 325 districts in the state, 281, so overall that's 86% have a voted PEPL, and that's why I said earlier when I said our AEA is a little bit lower than statewide. In our AEA it's 73% of schools, but statewide it's 86%. And then the average rate of all schools, whether they have $0 for voted PEPL or they have a $1.34 max, the average statewide rate is 86 cents, and that's including all the schools that have 0. The median, different way to talk about average when you line it up from least to greatest, the middle, the median one's at $1, and obviously the max is the $1.34, okay? Statewide, 181 out of the 325 districts, which is just over 50%, just over half, have the max $1.34, okay? Statewide, that generates $252 million annually. At Sibley-Ocheyedan, our rate is currently 67 cents, excuse me, like I said earlier, okay? This is just comparing our levy rate to those in our AEA with one exception. I added Harris Lake Park on here. I pulled that data in separately when I got this from someone locally because they're neighboring us, but they're not in our AEA. So I just did that. But other than that, it's pretty much the northwest corner. Not the entire AEA, but pretty much within Northwest AEA, all the public Siouxland and War Eagle schools that border us. So if you look through, you can kind of see the rates here. What I'll point out is the state average is $3. The statewide levy rate is $13.21. And so we're showing how much above or below you are at. Ours is currently at $10.75, so that's not quite, but just under $2.50 below the average. So when we're talking about renewing our PEPL, and you hear people saying you're doubling the rate, that's not true. We're not doubling this rate. We're not going to go from $10.75 to $21.50. We're talking about going from $10.75 to, correct me if my math's wrong, but if you add 67 cents, I think it's $11.42. Now, that'd be in the current year. Things change a little bit from year to year, and there's always other fluctuations in there, but that's what we're talking about. If we would approve this, renewing it, we would be adding 67 cents onto our levy rate, so we would jump up to $11.42. So if everyone else stayed the same, nothing else changed, and we would add that levy on, we're talking roughly $11.42 right above South O'Brien there. All other things being equal. Okay? What have we used the funds for? This is not meant to be an inclusive list. This is highlighting some things. I didn't go back. So the voted PEPL was first approved here at Sibley-Ocheyedan in September of 2015, 10 years ago, and then it went into action on July 1, the fiscal year of 2016. And so that's why it expires at the end of this year. I did not go all the way back. We do have things there, but I thought I would just highlight the last handful of years. Right now, what are some of the things that we pay for reoccurring, which would be annually, year after year, we're looking to out of PEPL moving forward? Our copier leases, and what I mean by copiers is like in the office, the copier machines at the middle school, elementary, and the high school. Grant Wood or Vista, that's our HR and accounting and leave software, which isn't a big thing to the public, but we kind of need that to operate as a school and an agency there. And that's non-educational, so that qualifies. Band equipment, we pay for that annually. I had 4 kids in band. The school did not pay for any of their instruments. I've had that brought to my attention. Why are we paying for kids' instruments? They didn't. But the school does pay for instruments annually. Does anyone in here have any of their children play tuba or maybe percussion? Right? I'm guessing you didn't pay for the tuba, probably rented it. I don't know that anyone would want to pay for a tuba or a sousaphone. Or if maybe you're a sax player, but you also play bari sax, you're probably using the schools. One of my children has a French horn. You don't march with French horns in marching band. You play the mallophone, right? So that's school issued because I'm not buying 2 instruments, right? So it's those type of things. The bass drum, the percussion line, some of the carts and equipment. That's what we're talking about when we're talking band equipment. We're not buying the entire flute section's flutes. They're still doing that, right? But we're talking about the extra equipment there. Projectors and TVs. I put projectors on there to kind of explain this. We're no longer buying projectors. And as I say that, as I'm using one right here. But for classrooms, we're generally not buying projectors. If those go out, and there's not many that have them anymore. Now we have TVs that use Vivi and smart boxes that display the content right on the TV. But that's what I mean by TVs, not TVs to watch like ESPN or anything like that, but to stream educational content. Various flooring projects. I think they did this, I don't remember what year, one of my first years, and we had the wonderful faded blue carpet in here, and they replaced that in that year. And we've done flooring in various elementary classrooms. We've done flooring in the home ec room and the industrial tech room because of some floor damage. So all those types of flooring projects that annually need to happen. Classroom tables and chairs as necessary. Student Chromebooks, the rotation that we go through. This past year we bought them for the elementary. So they have new Chromebooks this year at the elementary. And I believe on tap next is the yeah, Julie's saying yes, middle school for next year, if I remember right. So those are things that we buy annually out of our PEPL funds. Some of the major purchases in FY19. Now you got to remember, some of the times the work might have started like in one fiscal period and then we didn't pay it till it was done. So when you're going, I don't think that was in 2019. You could be right, okay? But paying for the marquee message sign out front there, our portion of that, some other agencies paid for that, but the marquee, that was back in FY19. The starting block cart to hold the start blocks on the track. If you remember what the parking lot was out here a handful of years ago, the back half was not cement, if you remember that. It was gravel and something they called asphalt. I don't know if it really was in that great a shape. And the track project, I'm not talking this year, but when they originally in 2018 redid the track and they dug down to the base and put some drainage in, they did that year. FY20, we did the sound system and lighting in here, replaced the speakers and everything in here, new mics, things like this. And then in the middle school did the lighting project, switching to LEDs. That was FY20. FY21, the elementary cooling tower, this is one of those maintenance things. Busted, and we needed to replace that, and that was, if I remember right, something around 50 or 60 grand. Not something you're planning for, but you use PEPL to pay for when it happens. The audio system in the gymnasium, the video board, our portion of it, that's up in the gymnasium. The football and track and other items, concession stand project out there with the bathrooms. The Ocheyedan softball diamond concrete behind home and around the edges there, and some of the drainage that came with that was paid for out of PEPL. FY22, when the rules came in that high school had to have shot clocks, that was paid for out of PEPL. High school choir room, a new practice piano, and a used one for the middle school vocal room. We paid for a new phone system, finishing up the concession stand project, the plasma table, for ag and FFA, high school lockers that were replaced, the elementary LED lighting project, some office furniture in the central office. In FY23, we paid for floor scrubbers. That's things that our custodians use on a daily basis. The 2019 Ford Transit, that's the 12-passenger van, the blue one that we got that year. The high school and middle school sidewalk project. So if you remember the sidewalks all around here, if you remember what they were like before, the number one complaint I had since I was here is, hey, are you aware there's cracks in the sidewalk when people would come in for basketball and volleyball games from other towns? Because that's what they look at, right? They look at those type of things in your facilities, and they were in rough shape, so we paid for that out of PEPL. The steel beams and installation for the football video board, at least our portion of that, and the flagpole out there, that was paid for out of PEPL. In FY24, some new furniture in the English department for some book storage and with the nurse. The middle school band instrument storage was replaced in FY24. High school choir room music storage and organization. Staff computers. We don't have the Chromebooks. The teaching staff has MacBooks. That was paid for. Some additional floor scrubbers and other facility items. The flagpole at the baseball field. The steel beams and the installation, the school portion of that for the baseball scoreboard. High school gym roof. Not that you can see that, but that was replaced in FY24 and paid for. This past fiscal year, FY25, some new fitness center treadmills, a commercial washing machine, because the other one failed on us, for lack of a better word. More high school gym and the high school science and roof area repairs, elementary soffits repairs and replacement, the press box at the football field, the roof. At the elementary, there was a door put between the preschool rooms, since they're collaborating, so the kids didn't have to go outside in the hallway, the preschoolers. There was a door installed and it had to cut into cinder block. That was paid for. A mini split, which is an AC for the technology room at the elementary so that we could keep our servers running. In the current year, things that have already either been paid for or will be paid for or are in the process of being worked on. The high school got new art room tables. The high school art room got new tables. The football press box got an inside air unit to keep the servers and things in like that cool so that we don't have to replace servers and technology in there. The painting robot for the football field, baseball field, and the things that it does, we paid for our share out of that from PEPL. The track resurfacing, which I talked about in FY19, was done for the first time, but to extend the life of the track, the resurfacing was paid for in this fiscal year. And then right now we're working on, in what was a storage room in the fitness center, in making that a bathroom. And then once that's done, that'll be a bathroom for community use, so community members no longer have to go into the student locker rooms to use the restroom facilities. That way there won't be during the day, because we have that happen. Someone wants to use the bathroom who's lifting during the day, and kids in PE are changing in the locker rooms and community members come in. So when we have that completed, they won't have to do that anymore. So those are some of the examples of things that we've paid for with PEPL in the past. Oops. Not an all-inclusive list, and not a list that is rank ordered by any means, but just some things that have been talked about, and it doesn't mean that there can't be things added or removed or changed on here. But as part of this project, we had to replace and upgrade, according to code, the high school and the middle school fire alarms. There's the potential that we're going to have to do that in the next 5 years at the elementary as well. Replacing the middle school ERV. I talked about it at the board meeting last night, and I'll just say it's part of the HVAC system to keep that up and running. We're not replacing the entire HVAC, but something to extend the life of that and provide some additional humidity control. Looking at doing that this next summer. The auditorium curtains and ropes. And I'll just say this is a good example. If you look in the back, just look at the shape of the curtains and the tears and the things like that. And on the side, the ropes, when we have groups coming in, they're stretched out, and a lot of them have patched together or spliced together, so replacing that. We've talked about new wrestling competition mats. I believe ours are, I want to say, approaching 14 years old or something like that, our current ones are. Elementary classroom and carpet and paint rotation that we've been working on, where we've been trying to do a grade level a year. New tables and chairs in the high school and the middle school commons, and getting some branding done on them. Replacing the middle school lockers, which have seen better days, like we did the high school lockers a handful of years ago. Finishing off the high school roof. That wasn't part of this project because of budget, and you had to make some decisions somewhere, so we did the middle school roof, but we need to finish off the high school roof at some point here. The baseball field lights, just take a look at them if you're wondering that. And then just more of our exterior door replacement, especially at the middle school and the high school, and just kind of the rough shape they're in, and looking at the replacement of the doors at the main entries now, and doing that at some other doors as well, just because they're wearing out, and that's what happens. So that's kind of an overview. I guess I'll open it up for questions. And I'd ask if you could speak in the mic so that we can hear you, and those online could hear you as well. There's got to be some questions, right?
How did we get the decision to go from the 0.67 to the 1.34 and not slowly increase?
What's that?
We're at
I didn't hear them.
0.67
Yeah.
and we're going to 1.34. What was the process of deciding that we're going to make that jump rather than just doing like incremental or something like that?
Right.
Because it's shocking to see that.
Okay. No, I'm glad you asked that. So once we vote to approve it, it's for 10 years. So let's say we went up 33 cents. We're not going to touch that again necessarily for 10 years. So that was my recommendation. It is shocking, you're right, but I think this is our opportunity to do that. And I would just look at repairs and buildings and maintenance costs. What were they 10 years ago? What would that have cost to do the roof work, as an example? And what is that going to cost 10 years from now? I don't know that answer, but we're generating about the same dollars over that time. It's changed slightly, but it's not a lot changed. But where the costs have gone up, and what that costs, just the replacing the ERVs that we're talking at the middle school, what we talked about at the board meeting last night, will probably use up our allocation for PEPL this next fiscal year, just at the 67-cent rate, and that's with doing nothing else. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's why.
Can I ask a follow-up? So every district is kind of at that stair step 67 or 134. Can you go in between that, or does it have to be one of those set figure amounts?
My understanding is you can, but it's just happened over time that if they have voted PEPL, because some are obviously at 0, I don't know what percentage, but the majority, if you look at it statewide, they're either at 67 cents, $1, or $1.34. There's really not, there's a few others here and there. If you look, the one was odd. I think Sioux Center's at $1.03. Why did they do that? I have no idea. There's probably a reason when they said it how many years ago. And then there's other one in between there. I don't remember who it was locally, but statewide there aren't the majority of districts that have a voted PEPL at 67, $1, $1.34. That's generally what they pick. Other questions? The balance in that account, off the top of my head, I don't remember. Part of that is you have to remember cash versus spent balance. So the SAVE fund comes in monthly. We get that check monthly from the state. Voted the PEPL accounts, they come in primarily twice a year. And the majority of the money comes in twice a year. And the reason is because that's when property taxes are paid. So most of the funds come in September. And then if you think back to your own property tax bills, right, you can pay them all right away in September, or you can do 2 halves, September and is it March, the second half? So that's where that comes at. I would say right now, I know intentionally going into the project here, we did, and we've talked about this in the last year plus at our board meetings, we've left that higher. We were building up a balance to pay for the fire alarm project, okay? Because that was gonna be in the $400,000 to $500,000 range when We got noted, so we had saved for that over time. When we bid that out, we got 0 bids on that. So we were trying to save a little bit of money each year to pay for that project, but still have the other maintenance and things going on. We had zero bids on that. So then that's when that got attached to this overall project that we did this year. And then understanding that, generally speaking, there's sometimes when you have an older building and you're doing a project like we did, other maintenance issues that come up, we didn't know what that would be. And so ideally we would have the funds to pay for that. And we also had the bond issue, the revenue bond issue that happened this summer, and not all the bills have come in for that. So that's why, I mean, that's a hard answer to question right now, because it's higher than it would normally be, because we have proceeds sitting from our revenue bond series this summer, and also some of the funds that we had saved up to pay for those things. When that's done, my guess is we're gonna be roughly, when we were looking at about a year ago, when this is all said and done, we're gonna probably be in the $200,000 range. We have tried to carry over a yearly balance roughly like that for situations when something unexpected happened. Like I said at the elementary a few years ago when the cooling tower went out. If you're not carrying a balance, all of a sudden we can't pay for that. And those type of situations have happened. So we've tried to carry about that $200,000 range in PEPL, keep it there year over year, but then we've expended our funds that have come in each year as well, if that makes sense. And then trying at the year end to expend that. This past year, it's been higher than average for the reasons that I mentioned. 130 right now. There you go. Thank you. 130,000 right now.
I really don't have a question, more of just a comment and concern. Thinking back, because I was born and raised here, been in an older school, this building itself is 50 years old plus.
Correct.
With the age of the buildings, we know we're going to have more maintenance, not less. And those things have to be done. I mean, if you continue to put off, or we can't afford to do some things, that only just is going to back up everything. The other thing that concerns me is like our enrollment. We are the only school in our entire county, and I have seen our enrollment, keep going down. We need to continue to be viable with the schools around us, because if we are not able to offer things for our kids, we have families that will tuition out. I don't want to see that. We have such a good school here. I know it sounds like a lot, but this is an investment. I mean, we're older and retired, but we know we have to do this for our young families and for their kids. And they can get a great education here. So I know we have to be good stewards and watch how we spend. And I know community looks at that, but I think we have to keep doing this. We have to let our friends and neighbors know how important it is to support our school.
Yeah, thank you for that. I will go back and say, to kind of address two things that you said. If we're not going to maintain our facilities, the other option that other schools are doing, they're either adding on or building new. Okay, the way the law is worded right now for debt bonds, you have to approve two measures. I think the first one's up to $2.70, and the other's up to $4.05, I believe. If you look at some of these higher rates, look at some of the schools, and then think about, have they recently passed, or are they going to? And some of them have their debt bond factored into this, some of them do not. West Sioux has passed a debt bond for construction and remodeling. I don't remember if Akron, they passed one, I don't remember if that's still in there yet. Sioux Center, have you been to the Glass Palace? Okay, they have one. Rock Valley's passed a debt bond, and theirs will go up. Sheldon's passed one recently with the construction that they're doing right now. Boyden Hall's passed one for some of their remodeling. Harris Lake Park, they have one that's going on right now. MOC Floyd Valley has a new elementary. West Lyon has a building project that's going on right now. And Hartley had passed one recently. That's one of the driving differences between their rates and ours. We're not asking for a debt bond, and that's not what I'm insinuating, but then we do need funds to pay for our facilities the way they're at right now and to maintain them. I didn't list, you don't list the fun things on PEPL. I didn't list the number of times we had to have plumbing or sewer repairs. I didn't list when we had to pay thousands of dollars in because the wiring went bad in a portion of the high school. Those things have happened because of the age of facilities, and that's what we use PEPL for, to pay for. And I can't imagine those are going to get cheaper or any less, but we want to maintain those. One comment I've gotten a lot this fall, we've seen some of our teams in football before, and we've had some new foes in volleyball, but it's striking is when you're not from that town, what's the first thing you look at when you go to another school to play them in volleyball or football? And what do you think the first thing is they look at here? They look at your facilities, right? And the number of times that we've gone for away matches here and people come back and they go, their school wasn't very nice, or hey, that was pretty nice. Or the number of times that we've had people come here that have commented about our facilities this fall and that have relayed that to message to us or relayed it to me. When we played West Hancock, I was in the concession stand working like everyone else, so I was just Joe Blow parent and handing out pizza, and I had two people from West Hancock say something to me. They didn't know who I was, but I just probably looked like the moron who was least busy at that time. And so they made a comment that, yeah, for a school your size, these are really nice facilities. We really like it here. And that's kind of the message we want to send, because you're right, when we don't have that with our younger generation, if we don't keep up with facilities, they are going to go other places. And we want to stay viable. We want to provide an education for our students and keep them here, right?
That graph on this, or that table on the screen, is on the back of your handout. So if you're wondering what those figures are, that is the table on your handout.
Okay, I'll just kind of echo a little bit what Diane said. I agree with her. I mean, we all have it in our own lives too, where we don't want to have to pay for new windows or, you know, whatever it is at our houses, and everything just is so expensive. So, and also thank you, Stan, for having this meeting tonight. But my question is, like, where do we go from here? I know it's on the November ballot. I know it passed or it failed in September. If it fails in November, I think you have one more pass, and then what after that?
I've tried not to go there, but I'll go there. If it doesn't pass in November, the next special election date is March, and we would be able to pass that for the next fiscal year. Our PEPL expires at the end of this fiscal year, so we're in FY26. So that means the end of the fiscal year is June 30, FY26. Government/school year start July 1, end June 30. So if we would not pass or vote to renew that, then we would lose all of that funding next year. We could bring it back up, but we would lose it until it passed. And correct. Yep. And when that would be, I don't know, because we'd have to make decisions down the road for that. Yes.
Can you tell us how much our property taxes will actually go up?
Well, everyone's situation is unique. The thing that confuses people, and this is for taxes in general, this isn't school taxes, this isn't Sibley Cheatham. I mean, it is, but this is statewide, okay? Where your rate comes from is your net taxable value. It's not what you can sell your house for, right? Okay? And then it's not even, right now under current law, it's not even your assessed value. Okay, that's where it's confusing. You have to know what your net taxable value is. So I have this linked online as well, and I've shared it out once, but you really, for each person, you're gonna have to look this up if you wanna know, but know what your net taxable value is. So I have actual random, or I have actual tax information of a random property in our county, we'll just say. And if you look that up, I did a screenshot of it, but you can look, and I put a red box around your net taxable value, okay? That is not your assessed value, which is different than what you could sell it for, okay? They have an assessed value, but they come at a net taxable value, okay? What you would have to do is take that net taxable value, and I put the formula here, divided by $1,000 times by the 67 cents. So this particular property had a net taxable value of $139,000. I did the math here. So for this particular property, that would be $93 a year at the full 67-cent rate. You would have to apply that to whatever your property is. I don't know if yours would be more or less, but that's just a point. You would have to know that. So specifically yours, I can't answer that, but I can tell you how you could figure it out. Any other questions?
Yeah, that previous vote was pretty decisive in the negative, which bothered me, but there's obviously a concerted effort to get people to vote no there. So how are we going to turn that around? I mean, other than, having a meeting like this, maybe interviews on the radio or Facebook or what all the people do these days, but yeah, it seems like it's going to be kind of a big hurdle to get it to pass if unless the turnout is much bigger by those who are in favor.
You're right, and I don't have all those questions. We do need word of mouth. So obviously I've changed approach, and you can put the failure on my shoulders and of why that didn't pass the first time, and we'll move on from there. Yeah, we're going to need community support. We're going to need community messaging out there, trying to get that out there, putting stuff in the paper. I've reached out to other organizations. We'll see if they're willing to hear me talk or not. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, I've had it secondhand told, well, my property taxes are $4,000. I don't want to pay $8,000, right? Because they hear the word double, okay? And I get if you're not looking at it, but I hope I at least explained when we're talking about the PPPL doubling, and people are saying that's a shock, and I'm not saying it isn't, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about doubling the overall rate, just the PPPL part of it, and what that's coming to is $93 for that particular example that I have here. So yeah, how do we get that out? I think we have to spread the message, we have to be proactive, and we have to help each other out, because there is going to be a contingent that's going to say no matter what. And just get the information out. That's all we can hope for. Well, I don't want to say like church and this is dismissed or anything, but I mean, I would gladly answer more questions if you have them, but I don't really have anything else to add unless you have other questions, and seeing none, I will leave it at that. So I want to thank you guys for coming, and hopefully it was informative, gave you maybe a few more answers than you had before, maybe opened up a few more questions, but thank you, appreciate it.